Welcome back to another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. Today, my guest is Philippe A. May. He's the CEO of EC Holdings, a leader in citizenship and residency solutions based in Singapore. He's also the Honorary Consul of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and he's been in the space, the citizenship and residency and by investment space for a long time. So I'm very honored to have him on the show. Philip, how's it going, man?
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure talking to you today.
Absolutely. And I believe you said you're calling in from Bali.
Yes, I'm in Bali at the moment. It's a 2 hours flight from Singapore. It's beautiful here. I'm on the rooftop of a new hotel overlooking Kuta and Legian Beach from Nusa Dua. I'm here for a birthday party of a friend. Unfortunately, I have to go back to the big city soon, but enjoying my time here and also enjoying talking to you at now 10 a.m. in the morning.
Absolutely. We're making it happen with the 12-hour time difference. And I thought the best way to get started would be just to tell us a little bit about your background. You're actually a Singaporean citizen. You grew up in Switzerland. You have a background in banking before getting into the whole uh, citizenship and immigration world. So walk us through that a little bit.
Well, I grew up in Switzerland. I did most of my education there and joined the big banks, Credit Suisse and later BNP Paribas. Before I moved over to Singapore in 2006, I became a Singapore citizen 2 years later. I had to give up my Swiss citizenship for that because Singapore doesn't allow dual citizenship, but never mind, it's a great country, so it's worth doing it. And since then, I've been living in Singapore, working across Southeast Asia and beyond that. And uh, now we set up EC Holdings with 9 partners worldwide, all senior industry practitioners, lawyers, and or licensed government agents for immigration. So we are rolling out various programs, including those from Latin America and the Caribbean, to clients all over the world, but especially in India, in China, in Russia, Vietnam, Indonesia, the big countries where there is demand for such Plan B solutions. Also in the US, increasingly, interestingly, and I believe a new trend will be to see also more Europeans applying.
You said something that was very interesting. So you were actually, I'm guessing, born in Switzerland, and at some point you naturalized as a Singapore citizen?
That's correct. Switzerland doesn't give you birthright, so it doesn't matter where you're born. If your parents are Swiss or one of your parents is Swiss, you are Swiss, full stop. And yes, I got naturalized in Singapore pretty fast. In Singapore, you can apply for citizenship after 1 year of permanent residence. It has become very difficult in the last few years to get the permanent residency. Most of the applicants get rejected, according to my observations. They remain on what is called an employment pass, and without permanent residence, they cannot apply for citizenship. And even those who do hold permanent residency often get rejected, usually due to their age. If you're over 50, it becomes rather difficult to get approved, or
Hmm.
because they have children, male children, that they don't want to include in the application in order to avoid national service. So Singapore is not an immigration country where you can say, oh, let's go there and say 5 years later I'm a citizen. There is no guarantee. It's a great place to live. It has a wonderful government, which is doing a great job. Prime Minister is a bright man, a respected man in the region and worldwide. But it's not a plan B option, it's a plan A option. If you want to make your life
Hmm.
in Singapore, you commit yourself to the country and you have the right profile, yes, you can do it. Otherwise, you come, but you remain an expat. So, nothing compared to what happens in Latin America. Very typical for Asia, maybe even more open than other Asian countries where you can never ever get the citizenship. In China, for example.
And it sounds like you naturalized relatively early on, somewhere around the 2006, 2008 mark.
That's right.
What's interesting about that decision is, to some extent, that was before it was clear that Asia was the future and that Singapore would be such a leading part of the global financial system. I'm trying to think when Jim Rogers moved over there to Singapore. It must have been right around the time. I wonder if you beat Jim Rogers to it.
Yes, you can say that. Um, I'm afraid Jim Rogers, who came around the same time like me, is not a Singapore citizen.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to correct myself. I know he's not a citizen, but I feel like he popularized the idea of moving to Singapore for a lot of people in our industry.
Absolutely. Jim Rogers, Eduardo Saverin, who also moved over from the US, they made many people in North America aware of how beautiful Singapore is, how good life there can be. That's correct. I came to Singapore with the intention to stay, and if you stay in the place, you better become a citizen than remaining an expat forever. Nothing wrong with Switzerland, and if Singapore had allowed dual citizenship, I would, of course, have kept my Swiss passport. But since that's not in the card, I had to make a choice. And the choice was clearly with the country where I stay, where I live, where I do business. So I even have more opportunities as a local citizen than as a foreigner, even as a PR. You're still a foreigner. So not too many Swiss went this route. The number is increasing, but it's still low. I
Hmm.
believe we will also see a bit of a change in that sense. But for sure, more and more people consider making Singapore their home for good, and not just with a permanent residence, but with a citizenship. Only then you're really part of the country, of the society. And that's where I'm now, and very happy to be there, very grateful to Singapore. And I can recommend it to those who want to commit themselves, who want to live in the big urban city in Asia. Of course, not for those who want to enjoy a beach life, who want to have big spaces. Different strokes for different folks. But for me, it's the right choice. Singapore is the hub in Southeast Asia. Within 2 hours, I'm in the big cities in Indonesia, Jakarta, in Vietnam, in Saigon, in KL, in Bangkok, etc. Can do my
Yeah.
meetings, can attend conferences, uh, and the Singapore passport is a great passport to have for travel. I don't need a visa to China. I don't need a visa to India. Here in Indonesia, same. Swiss need to go to the visa on arrival counter, pay $20. Singaporeans just walk through. So, right thing to do.
I love it. And I was very curious how you became the Honorable Philip A. May. How did you earn the honorable title?
Oh, that's just an honorific title for head of diplomatic and consular missions. So, as the honorary consul of St. Vincent and the Grenadines in Singapore, I am the head of mission, just like an ambassador, a high commissioner, or a consul general. Each of those is the head of a mission. So I'm the head of my mission, which is St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
So you're the consul in Singapore for Saint Vincent, correct?
That's correct. St. Vincent and the Grenadines appointed me as their honorary consul in 2011. Since then, I have been serving them in Singapore. My consular district is only Singapore, so I can't really do much in the other countries in the region where there are other honorary consuls. But obviously, Singapore being a big maritime hub, we deal a lot with vessels, with bills of sales, all these maritime matters which come to the consulate. Luckily, Vincentians don't need visa to Singapore. Singaporeans don't need visa to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, so no trouble on that side. And Singapore being such an orderly, clean, and neat place, not many Vincentians in Singapore lose their passports or get them stolen either. Actually, I never had such a case. Um, so not much work on that side. But the maritime business is big, so I support the various stakeholders in that industry uh, from the St. Vincent side.
Yeah, that's actually one of my bucket list things that I would like to achieve in my career is to become an ambassador or an honorary consul in something in that capacity. What advice would you give to me or someone with similar aspirations that they want to become an honorary consul?
Well, it's not a paid position. You don't actually make money from it, so I'm not sure whether it's worth doing it. But for me, it's a way to help this small country in the Caribbean, which doesn't have the resources to maintain a large diplomatic and consular network. If you want to do the same, you need two things. You need a sending state, a country that appoints you, and you need a receiving state, a country where you reside and which approves your appointment. So you
Hmm.
have to first define where is the center of your life. Where do you live? If you live in Mexico cities, obviously a lot of countries are out of the list because they already have an embassy there or a consulate. So you can't be honorary consul for them in Mexico City. You would then have to talk to countries that are not represented there. But if you
Mm.
are in a second tier city, say in Guadalajara or in Cancun or in Puebla, there is tons of country which have no missions there, no representations at all, and who may be happy to have the right person there who can help, who can perform the consular duties. So you have to make sure that you have a proper office, that you have the capacity to help when there is need, that you spend a good time of the year in that place. If you travel around the world 80-90% of your time, you can't really do it. But if you spend a significant amount of time, doesn't have to be full time, but I'd say at least half of the year, you have a good backup, you have a staff who can help. Um, you can do it. And what I advise everybody who is aspiring for that, take a course at the UN in Geneva. The UN
Hmm.
agency is called UNITAR, United Nations Institute of Training and Research. They have courses dedicated to honorary consuls, international diplomatic law, etc. Go on their website, UNITAR, check it out, take a course. It takes a few months. It's usually distant learning, and this is a great basis to know uh, the do's and don'ts, the details of this work.
That's actually a very good tip. And so, did you do the UN course prior to becoming the honorary consul, or afterwards to sort of
I, I
spruce
did
up
it
your knowledge?
afterwards.
Okay.
I did it afterwards because at the time when I got appointed, I didn't even know what unitary is, to be very honest. But even if I knew, the course in international law for honorary consuls only started about 2 years ago. So I was in the first batch. Um, there is other courses which are related to the topic. So it's not a condition to have this done. And even some Ministry of Foreign Affairs officials may not be fully aware of the full range of courses that UNITAR is offering. Um, so it's not a condition for the appointment. And most of the honorary consuls in the world do not have a degree from UNITAR, but the number is increasing, and it's definitely helpful in your work, and it's definitely appreciated by everyone.
How is it that they're going to elect someone that's not a citizen of their country? You know what I mean? Because you, at least at the time, probably weren't a
Sure.
citizen of Saint Vincent. And so they're probably saying, like, why is someone that's not even a citizen going to represent us for free? Yeah. How does that dynamic work?
All right, so let me split my answer in two. Firstly, the way an appointment takes place is usually not by the aspiring honorary consul to approach a bunch of countries. Usually, there is an established relationship between the country and the future honorary consul, be it that he has lived there, that he or she has business there, or maybe has family relations there. So you don't fly into an unknown country, knock the door, and say, "Hey, I want to be your honorary consul." Of course, you can try that. There is nothing wrong about it, but that's not how it usually works. Secondly, there is absolutely nothing wrong with a country appointing someone who is not their citizen. In fact, that's even the most common way that it's done. In Singapore, none of the member of the consular corps is a citizen of the sending state. Nearly all of us are Singaporeans, and the few who are not, they are citizens of third countries. And that's actually one of the reasons why countries appoint honorary consuls, because they do not have a large, first of all, they don't have a large diplomatic and consular network, and they may not
Hmm.
have a large diaspora either. Take
Hmm.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines. How many Vincentians are there living in Singapore who are willing and capable of doing this job? The number is very, very low. And you have small countries with tiny populations of 10,000 or 50,000 people who are more than happy to have somebody somewhere at the other end of the world helping them out in case a citizen loses the passport, in case of the death of a citizen, in case of
Hmm.
a delegation visiting needing support on the ground. And they cannot find their own citizens doing that. So, with somebody from there or based there who knows the receiving state and the environment there well, they are served even better than if it were one of their own citizens who may not be that familiar with the receiving state.
Thank you for that overview of honorary consulships. I find this whole world of ambassadorships and consuls and everything very, very interesting. Um, Maybe let's move on to another topic. And I wanted to know basically how you got into this whole world of residency and citizenship by investment and this immigration world. Maybe as you were working as a banker, you saw an opportunity in the industry, or there was some sort of event that inspired you. How exactly did that transition happen?
Very good question. Of course, I heard of citizenship by investment in Dominica already, something like 20 years ago, but it was not a mainstream thing. It was something very fringe, very remote. But then in around 2010, when I was in private banking at EFG Bank in Singapore, I had a client from Vietnam who wanted to get a passport in St. Kitts and Nevis. So I got into the subject. I traveled to St. Kitts and Nevis myself. I did the due diligence on the different agents and service providers there, and I helped him from A to Z to get his passport. He's a good friend now. He still carries the passport. He's very happy. But that's where citizenship and residence by investment kickstarted for me. And the only regret I have is that I didn't step out of the bank right away and set DC Holdings up back then already. Instead, I lingered a few more years in private banking and I joined one of the larger investment migration firms in 2015. I was there managing director and head of Asia Pacific for 5 years
Hmm.
before I started EC Holdings with my partners earlier this year.
Yeah, it's a very fascinating industry, and it's one that I just guarantee is going to grow massively, uh, not only for the next decade, but probably for the next 100 years. I honestly think it's going to be in a super cycle when you have all these factors combining, like remote work and growing global mobility. Um,
No
how
doubt
have
about it. No doubt about it. There is many, many mega trends in Europe, in North America, in Asia, which all point into the same direction. More people will be on the move, want the plan B, want a second home, want a second passport. We're in a globalized world. If you bank on one single country, unless that country is, say, Singapore or the Bahamas, usually you have a problem. So you need backups, and there is more wealth, there is more interaction, so there is more demand for such solutions, and there will be also more provider of these solutions.
Tell me, Philip, more about these super cycles that you're seeing and some of the trends that you're seeing around global mobility.
I see three trends. One is not a new trend, but an ongoing and accelerating trend, and that is people from densely populated Asian countries with poor passports wanting to get into a bigger space and wanting to upgrade their citizenship so that they can travel more freely. We talk about China, we talk about India, Indonesia, Vietnam,
Hmm.
Philippines. Go to the cities there, go to Manila, go to Shanghai. It's packed, and sometimes there is not much of a hinterland, or the hinterland is not developed. And regardless how rich one is in those countries, of course, there are fantastic millionaires and billionaires out there, no doubt about it. But as soon as they want to travel, they need to queue, they need to undergo the hassle of a visa, sometimes humiliating experiences at embassy doors and interview situations, etc. So they want freedom, they want mobility. That will keep going on, and there will be more people getting wealthy in Asia. They won't get visa free to the US and Schengen in our lifetime. Chinese, Indians, etc., will always need a visa. So they want a second passport. That's one very big ongoing trend. A more new trend, a second trend I see is in the US. More US Americans are ready and willing to give up their US citizenship because they become more mobile, they spend more time overseas, they realize the USA is not the greatest country in the world, and it's not getting much better either. In the olden days, most of them would not want to give up their US citizenship for whatever reasons, probably for psychological reasons, let's call it like that.
Hmm.
But now you have more Americans saying enough is enough. I don't want to pay tax to the IRS for the rest of my life. I call it quits and I become a citizen of another just as decent country as the US, or maybe even more developed and wealthy and livable. So that's another big trend. And the third one is a new, a budding trend, which has not come into full swing yet, and that is Western Europeans leaving Europe. Europe is on a downtrend. You see the energy crisis that's getting hold of Germany and others. The war in Eastern Europe, rampant illegal immigration, rising crime in big cities like Paris. There was a killing of two girls in Germany recently. So there will be more Western Europeans from countries like France, Germany, even UK, Switzerland, who will want to leave and go and stay somewhere else. They may not need just a second passport for travel. Their passport is good, but they want a place to move to. South America is very interesting for them because the seasons are inverted, so they can spend most of the year down there, and around July, August, when it gets a bit colder, they go back to Europe for summer holidays. But they may not want to
Hmm.
stay there full time. They don't want to pay taxes there, which are also rising. Look at the UK, uh, 80 seats Tory majority in Parliament, yet the taxes are going up. That's a joke. And a lot of people have enough of that. They turn to us.
I've often said that Americans need a second passport, but Europeans and Canadians need a second residency.
That's correct, yes. The Americans who want to renounce their US citizenship, they definitely need a second passport because the US, like most other countries, would not allow them to become stateless. Canadians, Europeans need a second residency in order to bring down their taxes. Yes, that's correct. They can move to Monaco, they can move to the Bahamas, where we also have offices. That's fine, but that's probably not the end of the game. If you are a Canadian or a German living in the Bahamas, fine. Bahamas has almost no taxes, it's fully territorial, so you don't pay tax on any income. But you better get the second passport anyway, just in case Canada, Germany, or wherever you're a citizen from heads into the US direction, moves to a citizenship based taxation. Uh, what's the problem? I mean, if you're a high net worth individual, a 7 or 8 digit entrepreneur, and you paid 750,000 US dollars for your home in the Bahamas, which qualifies you for permanent residence, what does it matter if you spend another 100,000 on a citizenship in Antigua and Barbuda or in St. Lucia? It's definitely worth it. Uh, and even if there is no global tax coming in those countries, you may have pandemic related restrictions, you may have visa restrictions in certain countries. So it's always good to be a citizen of two countries, one of them being a very small, friendly, neutral country that has no problems with anyone. Look at Canada. Do you want to go to China on a Canadian passport? The relations between the two countries not really that great. I'm talking about Red China, mainland China. I'd rather go to mainland China on a passport from Antigua and Barbuda than on a Canadian one, to be honest.
Right, because they detain the Huawei CFO.
Well, that's just the most visible instance of the underlying problems that they have. But there is many other issues. So wealthy or ultra wealthy Europeans, Canadians living in a tax-free country, be it Bahamas, be it Panama, be it Monaco or Dubai, UAE, get a second passport. You never know. It's like insurance.
Yeah, 100% agree. Would you
And
be willing to
moreover, if
go,
one is not
go ahead?
willing to go for a citizenship by investment solution where he needs to pay a low six-digit amount, one can still take up a residence in a country in Latin America, which later, after a few years, turns into a citizenship. Portugal is doing the same. You take a residence, after 5 years, you can apply. So
Hmm.
you don't need to do a direct citizenship. You can do a residence come citizenship. Both is possible. But relying on that single passport from a high tax country that may turn socialist or even communist, um, living in a tax heaven country, kind of risky. Dancing on the volcano. I wouldn't recommend it.
So, what's the ideal setup in your mind?
Well, let's take the example of a wealthy Canadian living in the Bahamas. If I were such a person, I would secure my status in the Bahamas by acquiring citizenship by investment, say in Vanuatu in the Pacific. You live already in the Caribbean, so take a citizenship from another region of the world, become a Vanuatu citizen, and to make the picture perfect, take up a residency in Paraguay as well. So you have your Canadian passport, you have a Vanuatu passport, you have the best of both worlds. You live in the Bahamas, plus you have a backup in the southern hemisphere in South America. I think you have a lot of peace of mind if you do that.
Okay, Philip, run me through that one more time. So, you're a wealthy Canadian. You first get residency in the Bahamas, or just run me through it again.
Okay, you're a wealthy Canadian and you want the plan B, you want to bring down your taxes, and maybe you want to have some more fun and more sun in your life. So you take up a permanent residence in the Bahamas, and parallel to that, you get the citizenship by investment in Vanuatu, which is a Pacific island nation
Hmm.
near Australia.
Right.
So you become a dual citizen. Your only tax residence is the Bahamas. And
Hmm.
if they do any silly things in Canada and start fooling around with global tax and citizenship based taxation, you can throw away your Canadian passport. You can renounce and you rely on your Vanuatu citizenship. And on top of that, I would take up a residence in Paraguay just in case something goes wrong on the Northern Hemisphere, World War III, whatever it is. And in Paraguay, you become eligible for citizenship after 3 years of residence. That becomes an option. It's not the now or never situation after 3 years. You can hold on to your residence and never apply for citizenship, or you can apply 5 or 10 years later, but it's
Hmm.
just another option. So you have two citizenships and a third option to get one more just in case. Or maybe if one day you renounce your Canadian citizenship and you don't want to rely on Vanuatu only, yeah, then you activate your plan C and you get another one in South America. That's the example we are talking about. Nothing uncommon. And instead of a Canadian, it could be a German, it could be a French, it could be even a Mexican. Many people in this situation.
Definitely makes sense. So Bahamas is a pretty high ticket residence by investment program, right? I think you said 750K US of property investment to get that residency.
Correct. So high depends for who, but compared to other countries offering residence by investment, yes, it's rather high. In Portugal, you buy a real estate for 350,000 euro, so about half of the Bahamas. On the other hand, you have countries like Uruguay, where you don't necessarily need to make an investment, but you need to prove that you have income. So it's called an independent means visa. Same in Paraguay. So if one doesn't have the 750,000 available to invest or is not willing to invest that amount, but has a reasonable amount of income, he can take up residence in countries like Paraguay or Uruguay instead of the Bahamas.
For sure. And I know when we were talking offline, you wanted to talk a bit about Paraguay and Uruguay residents in this episode and even compare it to why not Costa Rica or Panama by comparison. So I would love to hear your perspectives on that.
All right. First of all, I recommend, and at EC Holdings, we offer immigration to Paraguay and Uruguay because after a thorough analysis of various countries in Latin America, we came to the conclusion that these two are the best options for those who want to get a second citizenship in Latin America. Both countries, Paraguay, Uruguay, require you to live there for just 3 years, as compared to Panama, where it's 5 years, or Costa Rica, 7 years. Now, I'm not saying Panama or Costa Rica are bad places. They are wonderful countries with a lot of foreigners living a happy and good life there with a great climate. But if you look at the second citizenship, Paraguay and Uruguay are just the better options. Besides that, the minimum investment in Costa Rica and Panama is higher. It's usually not based on income. And another problem I see in the case of Panama is the conversion from permanent residence to citizenship. According to our studies, our field studies, my own research on the ground, it's not that easy to become a citizen, even after 5 years of residence. The
Hmm.
administrative hurdles are very high. So you may ask around among American Canadians living in Panama, how many of them have actually got Panamanian citizenship, or how many others do they know who got it? And how many do they know who tried and who didn't get it? So that's the problem I see in Panama. But if somebody is secured with a second passport from, say, Vanuatu or the Caribbean or elsewhere already, and just takes up a residence in Panama, that's perfectly fine, especially if one likes the tropical life. If somebody prefers a more seasonal life, then Uruguay, Paraguay is better. But that's more of a personal choice. From an immigration perspective, it's the time to citizenship and the administrative difficulties to get citizenship later, which lead me to the conclusion that Uruguay, Paraguay are the better solution. Now, why we talk even just about those four countries? Why not about Argentina or Brazil or Mexico? Simple reason: taxes. So, in order to become a citizen, you need to have a residence there, and usually, if you have a residence there, you also have to pay taxes there. So, I don't recommend any wealthy person to take up tax residence in Argentina, which is undergoing hyperinflation and which has colossal taxes, unreasonable taxes. I hope it's going to change soon, but we have to wait for that first. So stick to the low tax
Mhm.
countries, and if you aim at citizenship, focus on those I mentioned.
Yeah, that's something we talk a lot about at My Latin Life is focusing on the territorial tax countries in Latin America. And really, one of the cool things about Latin America is how many options there are. I'm sure you're aware that pretty much every country in Central America is a territorial tax country: Belize, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Honduras, uh, El Salvador as well, in most situations. And then there's even a couple others, Ecuador in a lot of situations. Um, what is your perspective on those countries that we haven't mentioned yet?
I'm positive. To be honest, I haven't studied all of them in detail. I'm sure from a tax perspective, it's like you say, they have territorial tax, so you're fine in this regard. The road to citizenship is not as fast as 3 years, to my knowledge. Then there is some physical presence requirements in most of them. But yes, they are interesting, particularly Nicaragua. I may do a trip to Nicaragua myself sometime next year to get a better picture. Um, it's probably another good option in Latin America, but to be honest, I don't know enough details to recommend it at this stage.
Yeah, that's fair. So let's focus on Paraguay and Uruguay for a minute. Um, in your experience, have you seen clients or anecdotes of people successfully getting Paraguayan citizenship?
Oh, yes, many. Those who want to get it and who work towards that goal, who play by the rules, they have all gotten it. There is a minimal language requirement. You need to be able to speak some Spanish. You can't do it with zero, but that's absolutely manageable. It's not a written exam where not a written language test where you have to sit down and make a certain minimum score, but you need to be able to express yourself in Spanish and understand some basic questions.
Hmm.
Similar picture in Uruguay. Um, so people don't get turned down arbitrarily. You do your years, you keep your police record clean, you learn basic Spanish, and you will get it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what would be some good ways of like generating activity in a country? So you mentioned opening up a local company. I mean, like buying a condo is very straightforward and easy,
Yes.
but I feel like I feel like a good reason to talk to you and have you on the podcast is you might know some other cool ways or ways that people don't think about to sort of generate local ties. Like for example, one might be like, let's say you teach a class at a local university, and so 1 month a year you teach a class, or something like that. Or maybe you get a real estate broker's license, and I don't know, maybe you flip a couple properties or something and you can kind of do that remotely even. Or things like that. Or maybe
Yep.
buy like a working farm, and the working farm generates some money or something. I don't know.
Yes, yes. All these, all what you mentioned are good options. You can buy a condo, small or large, uh, rent it out, get regular income from that, uh, show that income. You can also buy such a condo under the name of a company. So you set up your company first, then you buy a condo in the company's name, or if you already bought it, you transfer it to the company. So you have both. You have real estate ownership and income, and you have a local active company. That is one way. Licenses, good idea. You can, in both countries, Uruguay, Paraguay, apply for a gun license. Again, you have
Yep.
to be clean, of course, but that also shows that you are an approved and a person, a responsible person of good conduct. You can become a member in your favorite football club. Of course, Latin America is crazy about football. And for the American listeners, I mean soccer. I mean the real football. So you
Like
join
join a
the
country club.
you go to the match, or you may even want to play if you're in the right age and fitness, or you may train some youth. These are very good ways to connect. Myself, I'm a hobby ornithologist, a naturalist. I like to watch birds, but also reptiles, mammals. So I joined a nature society. Um, so
And
get
then do you
involved.
show that? Like, so, and then you basically get like a piece of paper or something that says, Philip is a member of the bird watching society. And then maybe the bird watching society president like signs the piece of paper, gives a recommendation for you or something. And then you're going to
Something like
attach,
that.
and then you're going to
Yes,
attach that along with your citizenship application so that they can kind of see that you're a member of the community. Is that the idea?
exactly, exactly. You are a member formally, and you can show your membership, your contributions, and you're probably gonna make friends there with like-minded people. So it doesn't have to be bird watching. It can be salsa classes, it can be cooking classes, it can be yoga, it can be anything. You make friends in Uruguay. When you apply for your citizenship, you need to bring along two witnesses to the electoral court. So these are the places where you meet friends who can then vouch for you. Um, so plenty of options to get involved locally and to show and prove ties. That's correct.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting topic and a creative one as well. So I wouldn't, I think it'd be good to stick on this topic for a minute. Um, Regarding the owning the property in a company, would you recommend, so you'd recommend owning the property in a company, or would you maybe do that with the second property? Or like if you could only afford one property, would it be better to own it outright in your own name or to own it under the company?
It depends. If you set up a company anyway to do some other businesses and transactions, then you can own the property in your own name. If the property is your only investment in the country, your only business in the country, why not do it under the company name so that you have both, and that you can file taxes from the company as well as personally on the salary or dividend that you draw from the company. It depends on how many links and ties you have. Strictly speaking, you neither have to have a company or a property. You can do it without. But of course,
Hmm.
if you do, it's better. And in Paraguay, in Uruguay, you can buy a condo for as little as, say, 80,000, 100,000 bucks. Uh, One better, rent it out for a few $100s a month. And that's a very legitimate activity. A company always gives you a bit more work to do, but at the same time, it gives you a bit more credibility. So if you don't have anything else than the real estate, yes, set up a company.
Yeah. What would be some other like simple things that a company could do if if it wasn't the real estate, but it was, I don't know, some sort of other activity? What could you like maybe pay out some contractors to do IT stuff for you, or like what could you
Correct.
do just to get like a little bit of money coming into it?
So consulting is a large field. Everybody may consult clients in his line of business, be it finance, be it agriculture, be it entertainment, be it anything. You can use a company for consulting purpose. At the same time, like you said, you may have the company invoicing clients for online services, for e-commerce, uh, even international business. You may not have a client in the country, but you may have your company in the country and the client overseas who pays into the company account in the immigration country for services that are rendered remotely. That's getting more and more popular. So you don't need to be in the country where your client resides. You may work remotely and promote your services for distant learning, for IT solutions,
Hmm.
etc., etc. Plenty of options to use such a company for relatively humble but good, legitimate, and regular business.
When it comes to the CBI programs, often there's a donation option and there's a real estate option. Um, do you tend to recommend one over the other?
Donation versus real estate. I do not have any personal preference, and I do not recommend any client either or. I do give the options to everyone. I make everyone understand that there are two options. I point out the differences and make sure that they make a deliberate, a good decision, so that they don't come back to me later and say, "Hey, Philip, why didn't you tell me that?" Same for the countries. A lot of people ask me, "What is the most popular country? Is it St. Kitts and Nevis? Is it this? Is it that? Which one do you recommend?" My answer is always, it depends. It depends on your situation. It depends on your family configuration. Even if, say, these three Caribbean countries, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Lucia, are very similar, there are significant differences, at least in terms of costs. If you're a single applicant, you better go to St. Lucia. If you're a family of four, you better go to Antigua, because total cost and cost per capita are quite lower than in the other countries. If somebody then says, no, I want something else, he may give me the reason or not. I respect that and I go ahead. I don't try to persuade anyone. I execute anything they tell me. I just want to be sure I have told them beforehand what are the options, so that they don't come back and say, hey, but you didn't tell me this.
Yeah, I think the CBI programs in the Caribbean are a great option for a lot of people. I think it maybe originally got sort of not the first wave, but I think the most recent wave has been with the crypto people. Um,
Yes,
and
correct.
and so that was definitely the big wave. Obviously, crypto's kind of in a bear market, but I think that through that crypto wave, it sort of popularized the idea in the imagination of a larger segment of the population among remote workers and digital nomads, and lots of sophisticated financial people, etc. And I think now you're going to see a new wave where it's just sort of logical high net worth people that just say, if you have over like 5 million bucks, like whatever, 100K, like totally worth it.
Absolutely correct. These are the buzzwords: digital nomads, crypto investors, etc. There is more and more of those types from the US and Canada coming to us looking for citizenship by investment. Some of them they leave overseas. Usually in the Bahamas. Some of them they still stay back home. Some of them are very young. We were a sponsor. EC Holding was a sponsor at the Bitcoin conference in Miami earlier this year.
Hmm.
Um, so we have seen all kind of clients there, uh, people which would probably not have existed 10, 20 years ago. Of course, you had the occasional whiz kid who made a ton of money already 10 years ago. But today, it's, I wouldn't say mainstream, but it's just much more common. And obviously, these types are also less um, inclined to retain their US citizenship for purely sentimental reasons. In the olden days, obviously, you had a lot of Americans who didn't even travel much, who may have fought or had a father or grandfather who fought in the World War, who would never ever consider giving up U.S. citizenship, regardless of how much tax they can save. Uh, this generation is now getting less and less, and you have more people who think internationally, who think globally, who say, "Hey, I'm a patriotic American, but if you take 53% of my income, you're a thief, you're a robber, and I'm gonna give up that damn citizenship. I'm not gonna pay for the rest of my life to you guys."
There's a breaking point, right? Where it's just like, all right, enough's enough.
Exactly, and we have more and more people who get to that point. Um, you have some people who are also very strongly inclined politically, either on the left or on the right, who say, well, if Trump comes back, I'm out, or who say, if Sleepy Joe gets another term, I get out. Um, that happens more and more. I think in the olden days, the losing side, who is not in power, was more ready to accept the defeat and to wait to be back. But now, with all the shenanigans going on in the political field, you have more and more people on both sides of the aisle who will want to call it quits, or who just want to have another option. So, digital nomads, remote workers on one side, more political ramifications and people disgruntled or disenfranchised on the other side. Either way, there is more demand for residence and citizenship by investment from the US, and for similar reasons also from Canada. I was writing about the topic a few days ago in discussion with an American lawyer friend who argued that anyone in the world should always have two citizenship. And I told him, no, not anyone and always. I agree 99% of the time. But if you are a citizen of a few select, well governed, low tax countries like Singapore, Monaco, the Bahamas, maybe Qatar, UAE, then a single citizenship is good enough. So I don't have any second one, but I have residencies and options if need be. If there is World War III in Southeast Asia, yes, I'd have a place to go in the worst case.
Absolutely. Last question for you. I'd love to just hear your thoughts on the future of this industry and sort of the future of immigration at large, the future of citizenship and residency by investment, global migration. Where do you think all this stuff is going over the next decade and beyond?
It will go through the roof because the three mega trends that I outlined earlier: increased demand from an increasingly wealthy Asia, where passports don't really get any better, and and cities get more densely populated than ever. Unsecurity in Western Europe, and high taxation, global taxation, citizenship as taxation in the US. These trends keep going, so the demand will keep rising. The question is, what happens to the offer side? There is a lot of talk about phasing out in Western Europe. The EU doesn't like residence and citizenship by investment. They are socialists, let's face it. It's not a security issue. It's all about hate the rich, tax the rich. So how can it be that rich folks can get the residence for a few $100,000 in an EU country? Socialists don't like that. They don't mind illegal immigrants coming as so-called refugees, claiming asylum, costing taxpayer billions of dollars, but they mind about the few hundred wealthy and well-vetted folks getting citizenship in Malta or in Cyprus. So that pressure will remain. I don't think Europe is going to turn around, or the EU, let's call it the EU, because Europe is not the EU and the EU is not Europe, but the EU is not going to turn around anytime soon. They will keep walking down that aisle of socialism. So we may potentially see the phasing out of residence and citizenship programs in the European Union, but
Hmm.
doesn't matter. There is plenty of other options, and like you are pointing out in my Latin Life Twitter account all the time, life in South America is beautiful. Portugal is great, Spain is lovely, but if you can't have that sort of life there, you can have it in Uruguay or in Colombia or in Costa Rica for that matter. So I see more countries outside Europe uh, beefing up their immigration policies, shaping it in a way to make their countries more attractive for wealthy migrants and investors. In recent weeks and months, we have seen talk in exotic places like Uzbekistan, Laos, Suriname, Armenia about new citizenship programs coming up. Indonesia came with a residence program, Sri Lanka similar. I don't like these programs, to be honest, because they don't lead to permanent residence, they don't lead to citizenship. You still have a lot of restrictions in terms of real estate ownership in most of the Asian countries, including the ones I mentioned, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, but also Thailand, Malaysia, which have more established. I wouldn't even call it residency program. It's just long-term tourist visas. But nevertheless, these movements happen. And I'm also optimistic on Africa. Africa is on the upsurge. We have
Hmm.
more than 50 countries down there. Some of them have very poor government, bad governance, civil war, etc. Other countries are lovely, are beautiful, are doing the right thing. I was in Gambia earlier this year. Tourist paradise, no civil war ever since independence, very low taxation, very friendly people. And there is more such countries. So we will see more countries discovering the benefits of residence and citizenship by investment for them, and putting up programs, putting up structures, tasking industry professionals like EC Holdings to market or to design those programs for them. So I'm not worried about the offer side of the industry. I just think we will see a shift in the mid to long run away from Europe into other world regions.
I agree. I think Latin America and to some extent Africa are the last bastions of freedom on the planet.
Yes, correct. You can say that because you have huge countries there, like Brazil, like Mexico. You can't pressure them into anything. I mean, look at the let's call it the war or the conflict between US and Russia. These countries don't take side; they remain neutral. And US may apply a lot of pressure, but the Mexican president is not giving in. Brazil, I believe, even under the new left-wing president, is not going to give in. They will stay on the neutral course, and rightfully so. And if these big countries remain out of the conflict, so do other smaller countries in the region, and reject those attempts by neo imperialists to bring them in line or to control their foreign policy remotely. Similar in Africa. Africans cannot be bossed around just as easy as one may think. And in Asia, of course, all the big countries, they don't depend on the US, India, China, Indonesia. They do what they think is right for them. So the US imperialism, the US influence is waning, and freedom will be preserved in Latin America and Africa, and of course, to some extent, also in Asia.
Philip, thank you so much for your time today. This has been another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Today's guest has been Philip A. May, CEO of EC Holdings. Philip, how can people get in touch with you? And please use this time to share your message with the people.
Sure. Please reach out to EC Holdings, reach out to me. We run a website, ec-holdings.com, or our email, info at ec-holdings.com. We have a LinkedIn account. We have a very active Twitter account, which is friendly with My Latin Life. You find us there easily. Just drop a line or call in to our Singapore office line, and we will make sure the right person will call you back in short time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Philip.
Thank you very much for talking to me, and all the best.